Have you ever heard the sound of freedom? Have you ever heard the sound of freedom?
You're listening to The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak, connecting the reality of the gospel to the grit of life. You can support the podcast and pick up some sweet Flipside swag at www.patreon.com/Noah Filipiak.
What is up, Flip-Eponymai? Welcome to episode 120 of the Flipside podcast. I hope you have been enjoying the Unfragmented Bible sub-series. I hope it's helping answer some of your questions about the Bible and how it was put together, and soon we'll be making a shift on that sub-series back into what I intended it to be to start with, which is the kingdom of God in the Bible, and looking at the story of the Old Testament as it relates to the land, the king, the temple, the nation, and how that leads into Jesus. And it may sound like an overstatement, but I think as we walk through that together, there's a compelling case to be made that we have missed the main message of the Bible. We have missed the main purpose of the Bible when we don't see the lens of Scripture, that pipeline in Scripture of how those promises that I just mentioned, land, king, etc., come true in Jesus and what that looks like. So I'm really excited for that, the Unfragmented Bible, to shift into that, but I also hope it's been helpful to you. I've shown those first three first three episodes to my kids, my middle school kids who were having questions about the Bible and how it was put together. And honestly, just some of those cookie cutter answers, they just don't make sense. They don't make sense to an honest brain, an honest someone who's not, biased already with those preconceived categories. And so I hope it can help you in that same way, and or even perhaps your kids, teenagers, or whatever it may be, that are starting to ask some of those questions as far as what I covered in about Genesis 1 in those first few. So let's jump into today, though, with this episode 120 here. On the flip side, I am interviewing my friend Ken Wytsma. He is a returner to the flip side, and today we are going to be talking about his new book coming out, or the book that just came out, I should say, The Sleep You're Longing For. And this, the subtitle is How Rest Connects Us to Happiness, Healing, and Hope. And so Ken is a pastor, and he wrote this book as what's considered a popular book. So it's written through a Christian publisher, but it isn't really written to a Christian audience. And yet within it, you'll see in the interview, especially today, we find the gospel in today's interview. I love it. We start talking about conditional love as the opposite of the gospel. And man, it's just really, really good stuff that we get into. I love talking to Ken. So before we jump into his bio and interview, let me just give a quick shout out. Angry Brew for sponsoring the flip side. Got my Angry Brew sloshing around in my third favorite podcast is the Flip Side mug today. Head over to angrybrew.com, fivelakes.com. Use promo code FLIP to get 10% off your order. Also, shout out to Patreon supporters. If you want to interact with me on every one of the Flipside episodes, I put a unique, exclusive, private blog post up on Patreon. And for Patreon supporters, can interact with me there. We can dig into the deeper nuances of these interviews. So head over to patreon.com/Noah Filipiak if you want to join that community and support team. So let me tell you about Ken's official bio. First of all, you can find Ken at kenwytsma.com. WYTSMA. Twitter and Instagram at KJ Wytsma, and also on Facebook. Ken Wytsma is an award-winning author and teacher with a love for exploring how history, philosophy, and culture shape the way we live today. He is an entrepreneur who started organizations, guided nonprofits, and launched creative projects that connect people across disciplines and communities. Those are some lines from his official bio. I know Ken from work that we have done together with World Relief, dating back to the Haiti 2010 earthquake, where we took a trip together and became friends, and have stayed in touch ever since. And Ken's sort of ministry life arc journey we talk about back in episode 92 of The Flip Side, which was February 5th, 2024. Check that out for a little more of Ken's backstory. But it's been really cool to see the deep rooted healing and wholeness that God has done in Ken's life after a couple decades of really high pace, really high achievement, accomplishing a lot of things, and the burnout that's brought, which brought with it insomnia and sleep issues, which brought with it this book. So looking forward to this conversation with Ken. I think you're going to get a lot out of it, and I highly recommend you check out his new book, The Sleep You're Longing For. Here we go.
Heard the sound of freedom. Have you ever heard the sound of freedom?
All right, Ken, welcome back to the flip side. We are glad to have you back.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So, I just read your bio in the intro that I haven't recorded yet. The title of your book, which I just read, Sleep, The Sleep We're Longing For. Correct me on that?
Yeah.
The Sleep We're Longing For. Okay, I'm very professional here. All right. So, first, what led you to write this book? I mean, you can give a little intro, of kind of your as it relates to your bio and history, but this is a cool book. It's a unique book. I don't think there's a lot of books out there like this coming from pastor type people. So yeah, what was the catalyst for this?
Yeah, it's a big question. As you were saying it breaks into three parts in my mind. There's the lived reality that kind of prompted me to have to pay attention to sleep. Spend a lot of time trying to learn how to sleep again. So there's kind of the life part. There's the publishing part, which is its own interesting story. I got a call one day from a publisher asking if I had a book in me and if I was wanting to write something. And I said, well, the only thing I would write on would be sleep. And I thought they wouldn't really be interested in that. And she said, well, tell us more. And so put a proposal together. And they liked it. They felt like it was going after a niche and something that was needed. And for a Christian publisher to take on a popular level book that's not written to be a religious book was kind of cool to see them do that. Uh, yeah, and then there's a third part to it, which was the type of book I wanted to write on sleep, which was hopefully a grace-based and gentle book that engaged people on the topic. Because when I was going through the worst of my insomnia, everyone would recommend books. My doctors would give me books, and they were all by whoever MD. And they knew a lot about sleep, but within the first chapter, I felt so guilty. Like there's so many shoulds and oughts and so many things I was doing wrong. And I just felt like a failure, and it created more anxiety. And so, then I had to kind of push those books away, and they taunted me and everything else. So yeah, I wanted to write something that was normalizing a bit. There's a couple billion people that will struggle with sleep tonight. So that whole idea that we're the only one or that we're isolated is a game of our mind. It doesn't bear out, obviously, in the statistics.
Yeah, man. Well, tell us a little bit about that insomnia struggle for you, the journey that you've been on, from maybe, and we talked about this some on when you were on the flip side, I think in the fall, last year sometime, but just that journey of being a high achiever, and some of that played into, these sleep issues. But and I want to say this too, your book I really like it because it's not this just technical, here's how to fall asleep book. It's really all encompassing. Like as I read it, I felt just a lot of really good mental health pieces within it, sustainable living pieces within it. And what does that look like for your, personal story that led you to this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing, reverse engineering sleep, right? And I think what we find out is that how we live our days affects how we experience our nights. But we treat it as a totally isolated thing. I'm struggling between 10:30 and 6 in the morning. That's the problem. When the reality is when we're spun up all day and we've got our nervous systems vibrating and we're trashing them and all the hormones and everything else that's going on. Um, the mental cycles, no wind down period, and then all of a sudden we get to this brick wall and we just want to shut off and go to sleep. Like, it doesn't work like that. And so with modern society, with where culture's at, with technological increase, we're accelerating change beyond where our bodies can handle it, physically handle it, mentally handle it, which is why we see so much anxiety, depression in kids. I was talking to a doctor the other day, specialist in ADHD, and I asked him the question. I said, "Are we culturally creating more people with ADHD, year on year as we go forward?" And he said, a lot of specialists don't want to answer that question, but the reality is, yeah, we're winding people up and then getting their brains to kind of pattern in a certain way that always is going to keep them amped up, right? So, yeah, for me, it was kind of this reverse engineering and just realizing how much we have to look at the whole of life, our nervous systems, how we're made and wired up, what that means. So mental health, sleep, culture, sleep, religion, faith, sleep, creativity, sleep, it all kind of comes together and becomes a unified whole, which I think it makes sense, right? I mean, when you think about it, it kind of is integrated, right? So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Did a. It was really interesting as you looked back at the history of society. Really, with philosophers and what they were saying about sleep, and then into world religions and what they were saying about sleep, which are all very ancient. Like, these are very ancient thoughts about sleep versus today. And it is interesting with today. I don't want to say everybody, but I think a lot of us, at least like our generation, we have this understanding that phones are not good like all the time. Like, there's becoming an awareness about phone addiction, and I've read some things even about college students and young adults that are like realizing I don't really want to be so attached to this thing and trying to find help. But there's always that catch 22 where everybody's still, it's like, well, I need my phone and love it, and like I'm gonna be staring, like, don't tell me to turn it off. I'm just kind of wondering your thoughts on that, with that holistic perspective of it almost feels like it's so much in the air that we're stuck with it now. Like, you're just stuck breathing the pollution because it is the air that we've created. And yet we know it leads to more anxiety. We know it leads to, just more depression. We know it leads to sleep issues. So, not that there's a silver bullet answer, but what are your thoughts on that? Like, if an individual is going, yeah, I feel that. I am kind of that hyped up all the time. And I forget the word you use in your book, the technical word for like your brain just isn't like hyper arousal kind of all the time, right? Like this,
Yeah.
how do we change that? I know that's a big question, but how do we can't just like go back 200 years ago and be like, cool, I'm going to live, back
Yeah.
then instead.
Yeah, I mean, that's I've asked that question of, quite a few therapists myself, like, what's the magic bullet? What's the one thing we could do? And I think it's really hard because we exist within a culture, right? And so, biblically speaking, so if you go and look at the whole idea of Sabbath rest and this taking one day where you're ceasing production, you're not, in Walter Brueggemann's terms, right? You're not in the economic system of Pharaoh or empire, and you're actually saying, I can exist without constant production. If you understand the Sabbath command rightly, you understand that God gave that command to a people, like a whole culture, like the nation, not to one individual. It was never like this one command that somehow I have to will it up to do something that nobody else is doing so that I can actually get rest, which is almost impossible because everyone else is running around
Right.
doing chores, errands, calling you, expecting things from you. And so, in some sense, it forces you to go with the herd, right? But the command God gave for the Sabbath was a community-wide one. So I think the biggest challenge we face is whatever we do as an individual is going to be going against the grain of where culture's at. So it really is a Herculean task in some sense. And I think it begins with slow habits, slow patterns, and building them in, not trying to do them all at once because then you get overwhelmed. But we got this shaker plate, one of those little vibration things, $100 on Amazon. It's kind of the new thing, right? Get your lymph system going, weight loss, all these things that people buy it for. But we bought it just because it's one of the things that uh, physically enables our nervous systems to reset. And so 10 minutes on that thing a day at the end of the day allows our body to kind of dissipate whatever adrenaline was stored up. Peter Levine, with the book Waking the Tiger, one of the early experts on PTSD, likened it to animals and said in nature you have gazelles, you have, kind of zebras, whatever it is, and they'll do these short bursts to escape a predator, and they'll have all that adrenaline in their system, and then when they're safe again they'll twitch and shake, and it gets all that out of their system. And he says humans, for whatever reason, we don't have that natural instinct to kind of shake it out of our nervous system. And so he would literally have clients come in and he'd have them like shake their arms and kind of get their body going just to get the nerves out, if you will. And so I think, little things like that at the end of the day, red light therapy, unwinding, putting your computer away at a certain time, setting an alarm for something, making sure that, you're not scrolling right before bed. I mean, whatever it is, but I think it's small little habits to kind of allow our bodies and our nervous systems to be in a natural rhythm and not be wound up all the time.
The evangelical tradition that I come from, there's a lot of resistance to something that is like even medically true, physiologically true about our bodies or our brains when it comes to some of these sorts of issues. I'm thinking about stillness and mindfulness meditation that you talk about in the book, and how mindfulness has been really helpful to me with, I use the Headspace app. I know you mentioned the Calm app in your book, just as this way of training my brain, like you're talking about, but like to physically rest, because my brain has, whatever the brain is, like it's literally molded itself around these patterns of hyperactivity and striving and not being able to stop. And to do that mindfulness, which I'll just listen to one of the meditations on there, and it, man, like immediately my brain and body are like, and
Yeah.
just chill. There's resistance to that from Christians because perhaps like the origins of meditation or mindfulness. But I want to get your thoughts on that. Like
Yeah.
how, well, one, the Christian faith is not, it's not antithetical to like utilizing these things that are just literally true about our bodies and our minds. But that I wanted to ask you about that anyway, but it came to mind, yeah, from
Yeah.
your last answer, because I think we're still stuck in like a pray it away, and or we've just created, we being like the evangelical church kind of tradition, we've created so many like devils out there like that aren't they're not like, we're fighting the wrong battles, it's like
Yeah.
we just label all these things as, so yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Because man, I have experienced a lot of that
Yeah.
physical help and healing from some of these practices.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think the first thing I'd want to do is just confess that I went through seminary and pastored for 2 decades, longer than 2 decades, without realizing that anxiety was a physical state and
Mm.
that depression was not just a choice, right? Like I thought anxiety was an adjective you used. I didn't realize it was a reality that's in your body or can be in your body. And then, like I said, I thought depression was more of a choice that someone was making and not hormonal, chemical, burnout, whatever that pit is. And so when I finally experienced those things for the first time, it was like, holy crap, like I don't know if I can cuss on your podcast, so holy crap.
You could try. Yeah, I'll see. I'll let you know
Okay.
if I get any letters.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was like, this is what anxiety is. And this is crazy and it's intense and it makes me feel utterly helpless
Yeah.
and vulnerable. And like, I can't make it go away. Like, I can't get myself back to kind of a stabilized spot. And the harder I try, the worse it gets. Right. And so it's this, and I didn't have any categories. I didn't have any resources. I didn't have any knowledge, wisdom. I didn't have any elders, mentors that could speak to me about that. And it just shows the bankruptcy of some of the things that we've avoided in the religious space, right, or the Christian space. And it was having to go to other places to learn basic physiological things um, that really ended up helping me. So two aspects of that. The Christian church is very reactive. Anything that comes from the outside is a threat, and then we try and remove the threat altogether. So Darwin comes from the outside. So let's be anti-intellectual, anti-science. Uh, DT Suzuki brings Zen Buddhism to the United States, and then it catches on with people like Watts and Kuriak, and so that's coming from the outside. It's foreign. So let's get rid of all kind of meditation type categories or peaceful kind of categories. Let's just maybe with the bathwater, but never actually taking into account that when people used to walk for miles,
Hmm.
they were out of their head and their bodies were at rest and they were okay being bored. And so it made them comfortable in the world. We are so overstimulated now that there's never a moment where we're just like existing in a state of boredom. And if we can't be bored and calm, then we can't be calm in the world. We basically are only able to feel connected if we're being constantly stimulated. And if we're being constantly stimulated, we're back to our nervous systems again or in our heads.
Yeah.
So we're just running so many cycles in a day compared to a couple hundred years ago. Or go all the way back to St. Augustine, who was the first person to write a psychological autobiography. So it's like he created a whole way of introspection and then talking about it, right? We do this like every second of every day with our Instagram and our this and our that, and it's so much more in our head than humans ever used to be. And that's why in the culture section of the book in the beginning, I really talk about that curve where this is our physical ability to adapt over time as humans. Like we can adapt to certain things physically, but the rate of change in society with technological increase has exceeded our
Yeah.
ability to adapt to it. And that's this tension point. And if we don't learn to do basic human things like breathe or sleep, we're going to be really struggling. And I'll just tack on right there. When people didn't have electric lights, or maybe not even candles, and it was just by the campfire, they had a stretch of time that was incredibly long for sleep. The best night of sleep I get every year is Christmas Eve. Why? Because I know I have nothing that I need to get up for. Nobody's expecting anything from me.
Hmm.
Nobody's trying to get a hold of me. I just have an extension of time. And so I sleep like so well, right? And that's the way ancients used to go to sleep. They had this big expanse of time from sundown to sun up, and we have just slowly, with alarm clocks, electric lights, condensed that. And if you have a smaller window of time that you have to get your sleep, any disruption is going to freak you out. Like, uh-oh, I woke up. It's all gone to it's all gone to shit now, right? Like it's all lost. And so we'll sit there panicked in bed going, I really needed to get a good night's sleep tonight. I've got an early morning and and you can't fall asleep if you're panicked. Like so the
Yeah.
compression of our sleep window actually creates more anxiety instead of this spaciousness. So spaciousness, mental health, nervous system, rest, peace, all of those things kind of tied to this idea of spaciousness, right?
Mm,
And grounding.
yeah. I want to go back to something you said at the beginning of that about how the church has responded to the anxiety and depression, where it's a physiological state. And appreciate your candor and humility. I'm like, I used to be in that boat too. How we would not acknowledge that, or we're actually just unaware of it until experiencing it ourselves. Be like, wow. There's an incredible amount of shame that the church then adds on to if you have that anxiety or that depression or even insomnia at times, right? Like here's the magic kind of Bible verse for that, and then you still have it. And so it just reminds me of some of the pieces of your book, like how you started with the compassion approach to this subject.
Yeah.
I also love what I forget who you quoted about the trying softer approach and the self-compassion approach to this through my counseling that, where I'm going to my counselor. That self-compassion thing is huge. Self-love, self-compassion. And those are all, again, like that resistance from my evangelical kind of DNA is, oh man, that's something like Oprah would talk about. So we shouldn't talk about self-love and self-compassion. And meanwhile, I beat myself up all the time. Like, I'm an idiot. I'm this, I'm that. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
this spiral, which only makes like all of those things worse, right? Like the anxiety and things. So I'd love to get your take on that. I guess it's, just to be concise,
Yeah.
specifically like that trying softer approach, what is that? And just why is self-compassion so important? I mean, not just for sleep, like you said, this stuff's all interconnected, but
Yeah.
for the sleep issue and so many more of these kind of holistic how
Yeah.
we live pieces.
Yeah. Let me attack it a little bit from the side first. Because I don't think anyone has a problem with like the idea of self-compassion or the idea of loving self or the idea of whatever. It's that pragmatically we know that it's gonna make things worse for us. And what I mean by that is we live in a culture, especially in the evangelical world, where it's capitalism, socialism's economics is not not the right thing, but the capitalistic system of getting ahead and staying kind of in the pack, uh, being respected, scratching each other's backs and moving forward. And if you drop out of that, it's like the peloton in a bike race. If you drop out of that peloton, now it's going to be twice as hard to pedal. Nobody's caring about you anymore because you're behind them. They don't really see you as a threat to win the race, so they don't have respect for you anymore. And they don't have the time or energy to care about you because they're running the race, right? And so I think we in our culture and society know that if we show weakness, it's not going to make things better. It's actually going to make our situation more difficult, right? And so we keep trying to pretend that we're keeping up with the Peloton when we're cratering inside, which creates this utter isolation and loneliness that anyone with anxiety and depression has experienced, where literally you're saying all the time, nobody understands. Like if my wife heard that one more time, like she was gonna like literally was gonna kill me. Like, but you feel like nobody can understand this subjective utter despair and loneliness, existential loneliness that I'm feeling. And you don't know how to describe it, right? Because it's so other. And so we keep putting the mask on, we keep trying to pretend, but we're falling behind into this lonely, kind of left behind in the Peloton thing. And I think the church especially does that because we have a latent prosperity gospel that we
Yeah.
all operate from. Like it's the operating system. We don't see it in front of us, but the prosperity gospel is the operating system of of the faith screen that we see in front of us. And we all think that somehow, if God loves me, things are going to get better and better and look good, and that people are going to look at me and see that person's blessed or that person's winning. And if suffering comes, we don't really know how to handle it. That prosperity gospel operating system doesn't know how to process suffering. But you go to other places in the world, their faith was born out of suffering. Like suffering doesn't throw them off. Like that's literally what
Mm.
gave rise to their faith, right? So in the church, you get this really interesting thing, and I'll just talk about it as pastors, but we have a CEO model of pastors, which is very different than the early Acts church, which was other people go do with the, deal with the administration, and the lead pastor, if you will, the apostles, were going to teach and maybe disciple. And so the irony is the thing that has taught me the most about God and about life and about faith in the last 8, 9 years was the anxiety, the depression, the insomnia, the
Mm.
PTSD, and the mental health and the nervous system and how all that was connected. But learning so much more about reality and truth also meant that I couldn't CEO, right? So what was increasing my ability to teach was collapsing my ability to lead. Um, and because we have this CEO model, that can't exist at the head of a church. Whereas if we had a different model, God could actually lead people on journeys where they learn things without them having to be thrown to the scrap heap,
Mm.
which is kind of what we do. We're a lot like an NFL team, next man up, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and so that's not the church as a tribe or church as a kingdom or church as the spirit at the center. That's the church in a kind of capitalistic or individualistic or Calvinistic kind of system that just is driving forward. And if you fall out of the peloton, then you're really irrelevant, right? So,
Yeah, and well, that ties into you mentioned that about in the book about Calvinism and culture as a whole, like European culture of the advancement of like I guess it'd be partially with capitalism. There's this workaholism that you are what you do, and you talk about that a lot with your parents, your dad being a Dutch immigrant, I believe, and it was just a lot of uh, I mean, you worked to prove your, like your worth, your value, those sorts of things. And it's interesting how I say we evangelicals, we would say, no, we have not married into any, worldly kind of way of thinking. Like I look at the Old Testament, Israelites, and it's easy to
yeah,
point a finger as they're mixing Yahweh worship with Baal worship, and they're mixing these household gods together. We're like, oh, how could you ever do that?
yeah,
And then I'm kind of already mentioned and
yeah,
joking a little, but I mean, but it's real where we'll separate ourselves from, like, if it's an Oprah self-help thing or it's this meditation thing, because we would be
yeah,
polluting polluting like the Jesus. But
yeah,
meanwhile, we have I mean, what
yeah,
words would you use for it? It's like, but we've married ourselves to this workaholism, productivity, capitalism
yeah,
way of being, which
yeah.
is just as evil, maybe not evil, or like idolatrous, like not of God, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is human nature to synthesize, right? To
Mhm.
to take and meld two things together to kind of create a congruent worldview or experiential reality or something like that. And we can poke fun at the Old Testament, say Baal and Yahweh, like how are you synthesizing that? But they were doing, if you take the word Baal off and substitute something else in, it would be a lot more like our lives, right? And then we can begin to understand it. But that's human nature, and God always calls us out of that. To be holy means to literally be set apart, right? And that set apartness is of His work in making us holy. It's not conditional love; it's unconditional love. And so when we synthesize and distort God into just a Calvinistic way of thinking, or I'm going to push away anything that comes from the outside because how could something from the outside be good, right? I remember when I was growing up, people would say Muslims can't be good because they're not Christians. Only Christians can be good, right? And it took me a long time to go, wait a second. The Good Samaritan. Like, good is good. Paul says they did what the law commanded without even having the law, the Gentiles, right? So good is independent
Mm.
of anything. It's ethics, it's justice, it's truth, and you don't necessarily have to be in the inside group in order to be good, right? So when we like discount good as if it's not good, and if we accept Calvin and not realize, I've seen all the pastors with the Calvin is my homeboy t-shirts and quoting Calvin in every single sermon and, et cetera, et cetera. But they would have hated being at Calvin's house. There wasn't a single thing of beauty because it was this austere, you have to get away from all art as if it's somehow idolatrous. And then he stood by while people were drowned in the river for believing in believers' baptism,
Mm.
vis-a-vis infant baptism. He literally stood by and implemented the death penalty on people that disagreed with him on something like what's the appropriate way of putting water on someone that's going to be baptized. Like the guy would have killed me. Um, he wasn't fun. Why am I hero worshiping him? The reason we do that is because we're synthesizing.
Mm.
We want to take something from outside of us and synthesize it to make us feel more grounded, more secure, more like we're in the in group, more like we got it right, that we have the truth and someone else doesn't have the truth. And that Calvinism, Dutch Calvinism, it's not just that my dad is a Dutch immigrant. I grew up in the Netherlands till almost age 7.
Mm.
Like I spoke fluent Dutch. I was in Dutch schools. I was in Dutch culture. I've spent most of my life just thinking I'm a jerk, but I'm actually just very Dutch in the full sense of what that means, which is I am a, to most people, I am a jerk. If you put me around other Dutch people, we love it because we're direct. We say what we think. We're not afraid of conflict. We're, whatever, whatever. But so I'm very ingrained that way, and it's time conscious, and it's productivity, and it's valuing yourself by what you're doing, capacity, intelligence, and what that leads to, if we're not careful, is an understanding of conditional love. I'm
Yeah.
valuable if I'm doing. I'm going to get praise if I'm doing. If I stop doing, then I'm lazy. I'm a sluggard. I don't have value. I'm not, nobody's taking joy in me. So I have to get going again. Pick yourself up, keep moving. And that type A behavior means that you stop listening to your body and you're just always shoving things down, so that you can continue forward, continue forward, continue forward. And when we shove things down in our body, we're basically putting energy into our nervous system and storing it there. And that's why one of the more famous books these days is, The Body Keeps the Score. All of that energy, if it doesn't have a way out, a way to dissipate, it begins to break us down physically. Um, and we in Western culture don't have those ways of processing out. We don't learn lament. We don't chant. We don't dance around a fire and sing or cry out or yell or whatever it might be. We don't have the traditions that help us get things out of our nervous system. And so it's just like putting rocks in, and then you'll get me at my age 10 years ago and you at whatever age you were, and our loved ones begin to see it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but we ignore it and keep trying to press on.
Mm.
Long answer, but hopefully relevant to the
That's
conversation.
good. I love
Yeah.
that you brought up conditional love and such a concise, like that phrase is so helpful because it is conditional love is the opposite of the gospel. It's actually, it's the opposite of what we have in Jesus. And I think that this is in my own life, some of the Beyond the Battle recovery ministry that I do and just pastoring as a whole. I think conditional love is the most one of the most widespread forms of trauma that many children grow up under, and then into your teens and then into your adult life as you're, going after a career and things. And it in that it you talk about trauma a lot in the book, and even PTSD and things, but like I never like we think of trauma, and there's acute forms of trauma, and they're very tragic, and some listeners, here I'm sure have been impacted by those things. There's also this chronic form of trauma that is very real, and it frames our central nervous system of how to feel safe. How do I feel safe? It's by
Yeah.
meeting these conditions. It's right. It's by doing these things, and that is our culture. Like that is the Protestant work ethic. That like it's like a traumatizing anti-gospel. That's a pretty big deal.
One of the biggest insights I had early on in my faith, and I think now I understand it more at an embodied level, is that if we're not given a certain kind of safety and love and appreciation, like a joy from people and just who we are, like in our infancy, in our childhood, kind of going up in those ages, it's it's as if we know that we're loved in the sense that somebody's going to take care of us, feed us, bring us with them. If they pick up, the camp and move, that we're going to get brought
Right.
with. We're not going to be left behind. We're not going to be sacrificed somehow. We're not going to, but what it comes down to is we go, I'm going to be loved, which means I'm going to be tolerated and included, but I'm not liked and valued as something beautiful in and of myself. So I'm loved but not liked. So think of someone in your immediate family and going, yeah, they love me, but if they had to go to the movies tonight, they wouldn't pick me.
Hmm.
Um, and that's kind of framed my understanding early on in faith of a lot of people project that onto God. God loves me, tolerates me, but I'm not actually like beautiful to where he appreciates me with my flaws and everything else. And if we don't get it early on in our childhood from caregivers, my dad was in the Navy and he, had deployments 3 months at a time and things like that. I moved to a foreign culture and then moved back to a culture. And if you don't get those things, your body begins to feel like, in and of myself, I'm imperfect and I'm not good enough. And so I have to continually try and navigate this calculus with the outside world to harmonize. But if I stop touching all the things, whack-a-mole, then
Yeah.
I go just back to the imperfect me, and me in and of myself in my imperfect state, is that lovable? And if that's not patterned in early in life, in childhood, you develop ways of seeing the world. Your brain forms up in certain ways that you stay hyper vigilant, which is the phrase, right? And that's ADHD. That's one of the ways ADHD comes into being, is early on in that development, you become hyper alert, and that's why it's hard to sit still in class and you're bouncing your leg and you're interrupting the whatever, and it's hard for teachers. So then we have to, you know what I mean? Like it's how the whole thing gets started. But how does that boil up into a church or a family or a marriage, or ultimately our relationship with God? It's something that has to be deconstructed, and reframed. Deconstruction shouldn't just be about theological kind of revisiting of ideas. Deconstruction, I think, in the most healthy way, is just peeling back the layers to what's true of us, and then naked coming before God
Mhm.
and saying, "Here I finally am," without the masks, without the fig leaf, without the ways of hiding and evading. Here I finally am, and I'm very vulnerable. And in that position, we're ready to receive unconditional love and go, my God, literally, my God, that is amazing. Grace is
Yeah.
amazing. It's beyond words, that in that naked state, I could receive that love and that affection, that you don't just love me, but you like me, God. Like
Mm,
I'm a part of your creation. So yeah,
love
I,
it.
yeah, love and like
Yeah, man.
an
Well, with our time
ADHD.
left, I'm going to pinball a little bit here with some questions. This is sort of a practical one for me that I would love to get your thoughts on. Talk through your own drive, talking about achievement. There's good things that you and I have achieved that we've been driven to achieve. For you, you did the Justice Conference. You did a lot of work with World Relief. You were traveling around the
Yeah,
country. You planted and pastored a church that impacted many, many people. And the books that
yeah,
you've written and are writing, and those are also things that have led to burnout, right? And for me, the things I've been driven to, there's a striving behind it, and have been driven to these things, but not with bad intention. It's not
yeah,
like I'm driven to do these because I'm egotistical and I need like the attaboys and it's like I want to do good things, and God has gifted you and I both as creative minds in the sense of creative, and we can like the phrase be the change, right? So you see this thing and it isn't unjust, it's an
yeah,
injustice, and you go, all right, let's do it. Like, let's
yeah,
be the hands and feet of Jesus, right? And then we are able to create things like ministries and organizations and things, but then we've created 10 of them. And um
yeah,
you've
yeah,
described that, like flying around the country, and like we don't honor those limits that have been that God has put in us. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that balance. Like, how do we find
yeah,
balance between pursuing justice, doing
yeah,
kingdom work, but
yeah.
then I say enjoying life as in the
Let me,
enjoying peace and rest when there's always more to
yeah,
be done.
yeah. Um, Let me give it kind of in chunks here, just the things I've learned along the way in my journey, and then even in writing the book. But I talk about it at the end of the book with kind of here's 10 things. Just if you want a thing, here's 10 things. And I talked about don't stress about stress. And there's a TED talk that's one of the biggest TED talks out there, but it's basically a female medical doctor whose expertise was on stress and how stress is killing us. And she'd been teaching that for 20 years and was a big part of that kind of movement about cortisol and all the damage that's done, and we shouldn't be stressed. And then she ran across a study and it put her on this trail to kind of dig deeper, dig deeper, dig deeper. And what she basically found was it's not stress that's killing us, it's stress about stress.
Hmm.
That we're actually so very resilient that when we're dealing with stress, but we're not stressed about the stress, like we navigate it, we use the stress to kind of help us, we feel confident. When we are stressed, we're like, oh no, I'm stressing, or this is bad for me. It creates a panic system in our body where it narrows our arteries, raises our blood pressure, contributes to kind of all these different things. And she actually realized, like, I've been contributing to stress killing people by teaching them that stress is killing them and
Hmm.
getting them so hyper fixated on it. And so she kind of, in the TED talk, is like, everything that I taught was wrong. And it's actually stressing about stress. We're wonderfully resilient. So lean into that and don't stress about stress, right? And so I kind of am like in the book, yeah, don't stress about stress, don't stress about sleep, don't stress like you're resilient, like tap into that. You're not the only one. It's not the end of the world. Like you're going to be fine, right? So in that vein, there's another podcast where an expert on ADHD talks about there's the 10% that are the hunters and then the 90% that are the farmers. And basically not hunter-gatherer mindset, but uh, adrenaline go hunt, quick bursts,
Hmm.
intense focus, like whatever. And then the farmers, it's kind of methodical. It's all about routine. It's all about just repetitive, etc. And she said, or this person basically says, the ADHD people are wired as the hunters. They need that high twitch. They need that nervous system. They give these bursts of energy for a month, a year, years, but
Hmm.
then they also need a month, a year, years to kind of recover. When they come back from hunting, they need to kind of recoup, right? So what we have done and others like us do, men, women like that have ADHD, that have kind of this drive, it's great things, and that's not wrong. It's that we're not in our culture afforded the chance to cycle down and recoup. We
Mm,
just stay on the hunt,
yeah.
or we're expected to stay on the hunt. So people ride our wave, but when that wave crests, they don't hold us. They actually punish us or leave us. Um,
So
and
true.
what does that say about our experience of safety and love,
Yeah.
right? So my sleep counselor, I talk about him in the book, love him, Dr. Babak Govan, but he's a PhD, and he specialized in insomnia, and that's kind of where I entered in with him. And I asked him not too long ago, after the book was published, I was like, man, is there just anything I can do for my nervous system, and the ADHD? And he's like, you could go to a retreat and breathe for a week. And he says, but 2 days after you get back, your nervous system is going to be right where it is now, because that's how your nervous system was built. You're not
Yeah.
going to change that. He said, but here's the thing, like if you keep trying to fight against it, that tension, it's kind of like the stress about stress. That tension, that friction is going to create more anxiety, more panic, more whatever. And he said, look, you wrote 5 books in 5 years. You did this, you did that. You did those things because you have the nervous system that you have. And that's good.
Mm.
And be okay with that. But then also learn how to manage it on the flip side, not as a problem to be fixed, but as a balance to be struck. Does that make sense?
I'm distracted because you just said on the flip side, on the flip side.
Ah,
See that? I have ADHD, so
you
yes.
didn't even text me to do that. That just
Yeah, that's good.
happened.
You're also the first guest who's ever cussed or swore, depending on what word you use on the podcast. So that's a big deal. I'm going to send you a badge or something.
I've filtered at least six or
I
seven.
can
So
tell you're doing a pretty good job. Yeah, you're doing a you're doing a pretty good job reining it
yeah,
in over there.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and your wife
Flip
didn't
side.
kill you. She was like close to killing you, but didn't. So
Oh
that's good.
man.
John
I
Calvin, you would be a
Yeah,
goner, but your wife, like close, but she held back. So I'm glad for that.
yeah. Yeah, our spouses that have lived with us, figuring out
Oh my goodness.
our uniqueness.
Don't let your wife ever
Live
talk to
well.
mine. Let's just make a pact, okay?
Yeah, we'll keep that's the other side.
Or write a book
Yeah.
together. That would be terrible.
Uh,
No, that was a great answer. I really like that, and I will re-listen to that when I'm listening to this later. And I love that because it does go back to that piece of I've been thinking, reflecting, praying on this even recently as I'm in a season of growth in this area. And it is so easy to go back to that shame cycle of, Noah, Ken, you're bad because you did all these things. Like you created these things, and you hear those messages from people of why you did it. And even knowing there is some unhealthy like insecurity sort of under there, and some ways of that getting that external validation. For me at least, like some of that anxious attachment style, and just as there. I love counseling, man. I love it. Like you just find these deep spaces of healing and growth. But then within that, it's like, wait a second. I God has gifted me, like, and he's gifted everyone, and right? But to say
yeah,
this is my gift to create these things and do these
yeah,
things, and like I'm
yeah,
not gonna beat myself up for my gifts, like
yeah,
the way he's made me. And man, that is like my go-to. It's either like go at 100 miles an hour in a really unhealthy way, or like stop it altogether and just beat myself up for even thinking, of doing that again. So I really like the way your doctor and you have framed that.
yeah. You're making me think of the last bit I'd put in is, I think the most grounding thing I've ever seen is uh, is Elijah, when he's the hunter and has the big adrenaline moment with the prophets of Baal, and he's running for his life. I mean, it's all hunter stuff, right? It's all nervous system stuff. And he gets out in the desert and he wants to have this conversation with God. And God's like, no, sleep first. And then like wakes him up, nope, eat first, And then God, the violent storm, which matches Elijah's adrenaline, but God's not in the storm. And then the earthquake that matches Elijah's adrenaline, and God's not in the earthquake. And then it's this still small kind of voice that does not match Elijah's adrenaline. And what it says is, number one, when I have a conversation with you, the conversation starts where I am, not where you are, Elijah. And so, same with all of us. We want to start the conversation out of our anxiety. And it's God going, no, it's in the stillness and the peace that I want to start the conversation from my direction, not from your direction. And then what does he say? Elijah goes, I'm the only one. There's that loneliness again, right? That
Yeah.
isolation. Like, nobody gets it. I'm the only one. And God's like, no, no, you're not the only one. Like, there's plenty of people that I've got that are like you. But because you feel so lonely, I'll give you Elisha, because it's not good for man to be alone,
Yeah.
which was not a marriage only kind of text, and and God gives him Elisha, and so it's this picture of God taking our adrenaline and working with it,
Hmm.
and bringing us to peace, and then giving us kind of what we need. But normalizing that isolation, like we are not the only one. That's why Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus knows that utter loneliness and existential despair, just like we do, and just like the psalmist that Jesus was quoting. So that's normal. So it shouldn't freak us out. Don't stress about stress.
Yeah. Man, and I love with Elijah, like the cognitive distortions that he's living in there. When I say I love, it's just so practical
Yeah.
to therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and these are not like anti-biblical concepts. These are so like
Yeah.
healthy and a part of our discipleship. And to know that this amazing prophet experienced these things, Paul talks about experiencing anxiety, and it it normalizes it for us as we walk. That's what I love about the Psalms. Shout out is to myself, I guess. I have a book coming out in the fall on the Psalms, and it's just a walk through like 40 Psalms of basically it's the what do you call it, the latent prosperity gospel, that we've bought into.
Yeah.
And man, what you said about these, yeah, other cultures around the world where their Christian faith has come up out of suffering
Yeah.
rather than the other way around, where we're shocked, when suffering comes. And I don't want to minimize like the pain that we experience in suffering, but this is a very biblical concept that, and it's the book I have coming out. It's called Shelter in the Storm. It's not just a book about suffering, but it's a book about so many prayers we've prayed. And it's a devotional through 40 Psalms. It's not like I just wrote it. It's like, here's this Psalm, and then here's the devotional sort of on it. Man, I relate to those psalmists where they are praying for something to change, and it's a terrible thing, and it doesn't change.
Yeah.
And how much shame I felt in my prayer life because I'm praying like the formula that I was told by the people that said if you do it this way it'll change, and it doesn't. So I love the contribution that your book is making, and this conversation we're having is making to that, right? Of where we can normalize this, and in doing so, there is a peace and a rest that transcends our circumstances, and some of it is there's a physiological piece to it as well that you talked about with Elijah, that God is like literally getting this dude to calm down, right?
It's so relevant, so practical. And if you look at Jeremiah, right? Like I'm preaching through Jeremiah right now in my church because I realized, one, I've never preached through it. Two, I've never heard of a pastor preaching through Jeremiah. And then you get into Jeremiah and it's like this is the most relevant
Hmm.
like text for our time, that there could be, but it's uncomfortable. And so somehow we just all swim around that rock and never actually deal with it, which is wild. And I think you're right. We shame people. The leaders that we grew up under shamed vulnerable people as if they were broken, as if they deserved it, like Jesus' disciples who sinned that this would happen, right? They're broken, they deserved it. God isn't blessing them, so that means they're not important. They don't have any power because vulnerability and power don't usually go together, and we gravitate towards the people that have power. So they're on the margins, and we shame them. And Jesus actually says, whatever you do for one of the least of these, you do for me, which gives them infinite honor and worth and relevance to our lives. So, where we should be running to and trying to assist people with mental health, with trauma, with abuse, with ADHD, with insomnia, with whatever it is, where we should be running and trying to give them a salve, we're actually shaming them and then calling the salve sin,
Hmm.
which is the exact same kind of pharisaical abuse that was happening in Jesus' day, right? In group, dresses a certain way, plays the power games, the popularity games, the who's better than who, the I have more righteousness than you, and then ignores and shuns those on the margins. That's the exact same kind of pharisaical abuse that was going on in Jesus' day. And that's why I wanted this book to be a grace-based book, that you could read it and get to the end and not feel like you were shoulded on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so yeah, hopefully some people enjoy it, put it out into the world, see what good comes from it. But it's the sleep you're longing for, not the sleep we're longing for.
Did I say it wrong at the beginning?
You just made it more communal by saying
The
we.
intro will be accurate, I promise. Like it will be very professional, and everyone will be amazed at how professional it sounds. It'll be great. Don't worry.
It's all good, man. It's not about the book, it's about the conversation. So
All right, I'm gonna give a couple teasers of some stuff that's in the book that we didn't talk about yet. You talk about dreams, kind of where they come from. Can we have some control or influence over what's in them? I think that's a fascinating conversation. You vulnerably share about your addiction to Ambien, the sleeping medication. Is there anything else, kind of as a teaser, in the book that you want to share with listeners as we wrap up, and or just anything else that you want to kind of give us closing thoughts?
yeah, I mean it's kind of an around the world book, meaning it's sleep and sleep and sleep and sleep and so creativity, religion, happiness, culture, etc. But then really getting into a lot of the mental health type stuff, and our nervous systems, if they're wound up, can't produce deep rest or deep sleep. So we have to kind of deal with, again, how we live our days and understand that's how we experience our nights, that they're kind of connected that way. But yeah, so if someone's kind of struggling and looking for something that's going to feel safe, and hopefully expand their thinking, and not make them kind of feel isolated again, hopefully this book would be a tool for that.
Well, thanks for writing the book, Ken. The Sleep You're Looking For by Ken Wytsma. And thanks for joining us on the flip side again. Thanks for saying the flip side on the flip side, and thanks for cussing.
Anytime.
All right.
Heard the sound of freedom. Have you ever heard the sound of
All right, you can head on over to patreon.com/NoahFlipiak if you would like to interact more with me on that conversation. I'm going to put a unique blog post up of my thoughts that are exclusive to you, and I'd love to interact with you more on it. The book from Ken is The Sleep You're Longing For. You can connect with Ken at his website, kenwytsma.com, WYTSMA, and find him on social media as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here on episode 120 of the Flip Side Podcast. I will see you next time on the Flip Side.
The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak is a Beyond Ministries production. Copyright Noah Filipiak. www.noahfilipiak.com. Theme music by Kyle Lake at K-Lake Music. used with permission. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.
It's time to bring me closer. There's no purgatory, cause you're in or you're out. When you see him in the clouds, then you know it's going down. Raise them, raise them, raise them. They've been sleeping for some ages. Now all God's babies so confused by this hatred. Pulpit preachers shouldn't aim to be A-list. Money probably long, but short is what your days.